Hi. I don't know how you follow that. That was really fascinating. My wife is always going on at me about my gut health. My wife was right. I'm sort of ad-libbing this bit, and the rest is written down, so I won't be able to speak with the fluency of some of the other speakers, but I hope this is basically my story. This time, 3 years ago, I was finding out I had a myxofibrosarcoma. So that's why I'm here. I was asked to share my story, and I've tried to put together a slide that goes together with what I'm speaking about, because obviously if any cancer patient will know it's not just you it affects, it's your family as well. So that's the ad-lib bit done. This is the bit I'm going to read. So I joke with a friend of mine that my life can be divided into two distinct periods, much like the Gregorian or Julian calendars, but rather than BC and AD, I have BC and AC, before CHOP and after CHOP. So today I'll share the culmination of my life, BC, and the events leading up to the CHOP, and then some of what has happened AC. I should also say I always refer to it as the CHOP, but I know the surgery that I underwent was an incredibly complicated medical procedure performed by highly skilled surgeons that wasn't without risk, and that I'm standing here today is testament to the skill of those surgeons. So when I came to finishing writing this about 2 weekends ago, I hadn't even got to the midway point, and I'd written over 4,000 words, which when I typed it into Google, how many words would you say public speaking, that would have taken 28 minutes. So had I carried on like that, I'd have been stood here for well over an hour. So this is a very condensed version of that story. And I always tend to focus on events BC, but the initial request from Carly read, we have reached out to the sarcoma community, and one of the things they have highlighted as important is the inclusion of inspiring patient stories. I don't see myself as inspiring, I'm just trying to get on with my life. So I've tried to divide up what I speak about evenly between BC and AC. So I was first diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma on Friday the 13th of February 1998, aged 23, after finding a lump in my neck, which was successfully treated with radiotherapy. Jump forward 25 years, I was swimming with my family mid-May 2022, and I happened to notice a lump in my neck in the same place that the Hodgkin's lymphoma had been, and that came about after my son asked me to pick him up at the top of a water slide as he was cold, so it was completely fortuitous that I found it. I went to the GP the following day, and so began what for me was a 2-week cycle that seemed to define my journey along the cancer pathway: biopsies, ultrasounds, various other scans, up until the end of June, where I received a call from the ENT doctor I'd seen at the Royal Coleman Hospital saying the tumour had been identified as sarcoma. I'd never heard of sarcoma, and I must have just said to him, "What's that?" To which he replied, "It's a rare type of cancer." And he went on to say, "We don't treat sarcomas here in Cornwall, so you'll be referred on to Derriford, where they have people who specialise in treating sarcoma." Like I say, I'd never heard of it, so I did what most people would probably do at this point, Googled sarcoma. Sort of skim-read a few different websites because we were going out that evening, so I sort of skim-read it. And the overwhelming thing I read was sarcomas are often treated using surgery. So no one wants to be told they've got cancer, no one wants to hear those words, but weirdly, having that uncertainty removed, knowing that the lump I can feel is cancer, it was kind of better than not knowing, and at least then I knew what I was dealing with. And this was my thinking at the time: if they're usually treated with surgery, that means no radio, no chemo. I might not even need to tell the kids. I might be able to spare them all the pain and anxiety associated with a loved one being diagnosed with cancer. Little did I know at that point the scale of surgery that was coming my way. From that moment on, things really started to get going, and any fellow cancer survivors here will know, once you're in that cycle, once the letters start arriving, the phone calls from numbers that you don't recognise, you know it's on, you know it's happening, you know you've got cancer. And I was scared, I was really scared. You get to the point with the post whereby you dread its arrival. There's an anxiety that comes with opening of each new letter for fear of what it's going to say. But you've got to hold it together. As frightened as you are, you've got to hold it together, and you've got to keep finding ways to put one foot in front of the other. And it was in this 2-week period where I first started to sense that something big was coming my way. As the letters started dropping, I remember being a little confused when I received my first letter from Derryford, as the consultation was for a plastic surgery appointment. And I recall saying to my wife, I've got cancer. Why are they sending me for a plastic surgery appointment? And the names of the surgeons, and for some reason, I always give them their full title, so you'll notice it even more now I've said it, but I don't know if it's some sort of trauma response, but I always refer to them as Captain Surgeon Professor Rory Rickard, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Taylor. And I remember saying to my wife, what's with the names? They're a bit formal, aren't they? Anyway, mid-June, we drove up to that first consultation at Derryford where we met Captain Surgeon Professor Rory Rickard, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Taylor for the first time. I'd originally written hundreds, if not thousands, of words about that meeting, but to make it more concise, Captain Surgeon Professor Rory Rickard comes in his full naval regalia, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Taylor and Olivia Trott, who was a Macmillan and sarcoma nurse. Captain Surgeon Professor Rory Rickard explained the situation, the treatment options, the need for an area of incision of around 10 millimetres around the tumour. He had a really, really good way about him. He had a gravitas about him, but he wasn't aloof and he wasn't grandiose. And there's a warmth to him that was really reassuring. As he was talking, my mind was wandering a little. I knew what he was saying was of life and death importance. But part of me kept thinking, he really reminds me of Hastings from Line of Duty. But I knew, I was listening to him and I knew there was a book coming, and I wasn't wrong. So whilst he was explaining how they would remove the tumour, I was also thinking, what are they going to put in the void? What do they put in the gap where the tumour currently resides? How do they fill it? And then came the words that I'll never forget. The far right possibility here is, Stephen, we might need to amputate your arm. Now, they're not words you ever expect to hear, and I can only describe that moment as like an atom bomb being detonated in your brain. Everything almost goes silent, but simultaneously there's 1,000 thoughts ricocheting around your mind. Am I going to die? What about my job? How will I live with one arm? Will my wife, she wasn't my wife at this point, will she still fancy me? Will my kids get teased at school? But you'll be reassured to know my first words upon being given this seismic news were, no way, you can't amputate my arm, I'm a surfer, no chance, it's not happening. And I've retold this story a fair few times, and on reflection, this part of the tale always makes Lieutenant Colonel Taylor sound like the Grim Reaper, but from the back of the room, he simply stated, Stephen, if left, this will kill you. At which point I just broke down and began to sob. My wife held me, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and then Captain Surgeon Professor Rory Rickard explained they'd like to send me for another scan to get a clearer picture, and they'd see me again in a week's time after the follow-on scan. Driving back to Cornwall that afternoon, I think it would be fair to say both my wife and I were in shock. I remember saying to her, Catherine, they're going to chop off my arm. And I always remember what she said back to me. She went, it looks like it, yeah, but at least they're giving you a way out. It'd be worse if they weren't giving you a way out. There's so much more I could share around events BC, but it'll mean we're missing our lunch, and I have got a holistic therapy treatment booked after lunch. So to round off the BC bit, I've got to time this right. There's 2 things Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard said to me that I'll never forget. The first being, unfortunately, Stephen, there's no easy way out of this for you. And the second, I need to pause it there.
That's 5, one in the operation. But
how do I pause that a bit? Just there we go. Sorry. I timed that perfectly at home. Unfortunately, Stephen, there's no easy way out of this for you. And the second, which he said to me a number of times, he said, we will get you through it. It makes me emotional every time I say it. We will get you through this. So I recorded the following 2 clips on the morning of the operation, and more than anything I can say to you today, these clips are the realest, rawest, most truthful portrayal of how I was feeling on that morning.
Hello? So we're going to go, we're going to do this. I've got to say it was the first day. Without the cancer, not the first day without my arm. It's the first day and the guilt. So that's the way I feel. this house and deal with me. Right then. He said, he says, all right, yeah. Help him knock his back of his life. Yeah. What do you do? Over. Yeah. You're my man, so no coffee. Had an outfit before you, anything. I want to keep doing this. Courses, you mean? Had bait, mother bait, yeah. See, I'm should we put God and should have been safe, yeah. It's a nice girl with your classmate. And auntie, quite custom too. Because looking forward to seeing her tonight. Looking forward to seeing her. Had a short hold. Had you got bed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always strange watching them because it's like all this happened to someone else. It's like I'm a voyeur on someone's story. But coming round after surgery, and it's my wife that's told me this, when they brought me round, I was trying to rip the ventilator out of my mouth apparently. Immediately upon waking up, I burst into a chorus of Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. So I've absolutely no idea what that's about. But prior to the op, I've been doing those little video monologues primarily for my kids, that if the worst case scenario played out and I didn't make it out of surgery, they'd have something to watch, something to remind them of their dad, something to hear my voice. And I carried on doing those in hospital. Before CHOP, BC, I thought there'd be some sort of Trini and Susanna, for those of a certain generation. Remember Trini and Susanna? Grand reveal of the new me. I thought it'd be a few days or a few weeks after surgery. But it came the next morning, I was doing one of those videos, and there, staring right back at me, was the one-armed, no-shouldered version of me. And I thought I'd break down, sobbing upon seeing myself. But I was just kind of nonplussed by it. I was just, oh, there it is, there we go. That morning, Mr. Marchbank, the thoracic surgeon, he came to see me, and he told me the surgery had gone really well, that they got the tumour out with a good margin of incision, and obviously hearing that was a real fillip. I was visited by the surgeons, by members of their surgical teams. But when Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard came to see me, I remember crying when I repeated back to him those words, "We'll get you through this, Stephen." And there's a line, maybe it's because they were in the military, but there's a line, or the Navy, there was a line at the end of Saving Private Ryan where they've defended the bridge, but almost all of them have been killed, where Tom Hanks, who himself is dying, says to Matt Damon, James Ryan, "Earn this." And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to pay back what all those people, all those medical professionals, whether it's professors, whether it's oncologists, healthcare assistants on the wards, doctors, nurses, the surgeons, the cleaners, the people who bring you your lunch, to all those people for all their love, their expertise, their compassion, their skill, their care. Without that, I wouldn't be here. So to every one of them, I just want to say a massive thank you for all you do and for all you did for me. And I'm trying to earn what isn't just a second chance at life, it's at least my third. When I first got dressed in hospital and I put on my hospital pyjamas, the superfluous left sleeve hanging down just looked incredibly sorry for itself, and I knew I couldn't wear my clothes like that, and I wanted to own the one arm thing. So as you can see, I get all my clothes adapted, and that way there's no ambiguity around my appearance. I always knew that I'd need to find something that gave my life purpose during recovery. I knew I wouldn't be able to surf, which surfing for me is my thing. And I knew I had to find something to throw myself into. So I don't know why I did, but I started my own clothing brand, which began life as Chopped, but it's now called the Chopped Collective. Check us out on Instagram if you're on Instagram. And it's morphed into something I never thought it would, really. It's a lifestyle brand, where are we? Focused primarily around surfing and skateboarding, but also good music and art. And it's, for me, it's just around turning a negative into a positive. And I've ended up sort of sponsoring, if you would, around a dozen team riders who are all sort of from 12 to 18 years old, and to use the youth vernacular they rep for the brand. Basically, I give them T-shirts and sweatshirts or whatever, and they tag the brand in different edits or pictures of them skating and put it out on social media. And it was a friend of mine who said to me, I don't think you realise the effect that probably has on them, that someone believes in them enough to give them T-shirts, sweaters and whatever it is. It's something they'll always remember. And I love seeing how they're growing, not only as surfers or skaters, but as decent, caring, empathetic human beings. And the motto of the Chopped Collective is never give up, never give in. And I hope that through my story, I portray that. I've been fortunate in my recovery that it's been fairly linear. There hasn't been, touch wood. Is there any wood? No. Touch wood. Where am I? There hasn't been any real setbacks. Toward the end of February 2023, I got back in the sea for the first time. By June, I was able to catch and ride waves again. And this talk is titled One Way Back, primarily because the thing I wanted to get back doing more than anything was to surf. I couldn't envisage my life without surfing. It's that desire to get back surfing that has driven my recovery, that's given me purpose in my life. And a friend of mine said to my mum at Catherine and I's wedding party in October 23, it's a good job he had surfing, and it really is. I'm really, really lucky that I can still do and enjoy the thing I love doing most, which is surfing. In August 2023, I entered the Welsh Para Surf Open, which was 372 days after the operation, which I came second in my category. At the end of September 2023, I won my category at the English Para Surf Comp, and I retained my title at last year's event. Last June, I went with a group of friends to the Maldives, where I surfed twice a day for 2 hours a day, in the most beautiful place with the most incredible waves. And there'd be moments where I sat on my board in the Indian Ocean where I'd stop and take it all in. How lucky am I to be here, to be experiencing this? And obviously it was 2 years on from being on my cancer journey. At the start of the year, I got accepted onto the Surfing England Para Surf team, which is a real honour, as every one of the other team members have incredible stories of resilience, of overcoming adversity, and of not being defined by what has happened to them. I suppose my goal with that, should parasurfing ever make it to the Olympics, will be to try and be a part of the team at Brisbane 2032. I read somewhere in the autumn of 2022 that 2/3 of disabled people who are employed are self-employed, which set in motion a belief in me that I'm probably going to have to find my own way of being self-employed. So over the last 2 years, I've been working on combining my passion for and love of both surfing and coffee with my own coffee brand, which goes by the name of Dawn Patrol. Dawn Patrol being the name given to those surfers who rise early to catch the first waves of the day. The basic USP of Dawn Patrol is to source coffee from regions of the world synonymous with great tasting coffee and fantastic surf. Every coffee in the range takes its name from a wave in a far-flung place around the globe. Obviously, the dream is one day that can become my sole source of income. One day hoping to sell enough coffee to visit these places and surf these waves, but I can assure you it's a long way from realising that dream yet. So if you are a coffee lover, keen to support a one-armed entrepreneur, sarcoma survivor, check out www.dawnpatrol.co.uk, little plug there. To get funding to start Chopped, you might need to pause that. To get the funding to start Chopped, I enrolled on a startup business course, which if they approved your business plan, they'd give you a grant to get started. And one of the advisors on that course said to me, rather than flogging T-shirts, have you ever thought about public speaking? I was like, no, I haven't. Why? And he said, you're a really good orator. You could probably get a couple of £100 a go doing public speaking. You've got to sell a lot of T-shirts to make the same sort of money. My first attempt at public speaking was to my son's school, to my son's class rather. He said to me one day, please can you come into school and tell everyone why you've got one arm? so I don't have to keep asking them, which is a difficult, the 6-year-olds, you don't want to terrify them. So I've done half a dozen assemblies in school, which tend to be around the theme of resilience. I've been on the radio a few times speaking about my sarcoma journey, done a few different podcasts. And then last year, Olivia invited me up to speak at a patient event they were running up in Devon. And earlier this year, Carly asked me if I'd be interested in speaking today's event. I think when you have something like any cancer survivor, any amputee, you have two choices. You either wither and die on the vine and what's happened to you just overwhelms you, or you go the other way and you just try and make the most of your life. So my goal is to tie in the surfing, the coffee, the public speaking into something that pays the bills. It's not there yet. In fact, as I say, it's a long way from being there. But one thing it's taught me, this is life's, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I hope my children can look at me and how I faced up to the challenge of losing my arm and take inspiration for it from the challenges that they face in their life. If you'd have said to me this time 3 years ago, in the immediate aftermath of being told it would be necessary to amputate my arm, that 3 years on my life would look the way it does, I wouldn't have believed it. Over the last 3 years, as a result of what's happened, I've met and become friends with so many sound people who I would never have met had this not happened. I've had experiences and done things I probably wouldn't have done. It doesn't detract from the trauma of what has happened. It doesn't take away the pain of the phantom limb. It doesn't take away my social anxiety. Just walking down the street just stepping out the front door takes some doing. But I feel incredibly fortunate to have survived having sarcoma. I share my journey as an amputee on Instagram. I try and promote sarcoma as much as I can. If you want to give me a follow, I am the one-armed surfer. To finish, I love a quote, and I like that Nelson Mandela quote, and I'm glad I didn't choose that one. But one that really resonates with me is a Carl Jung quote, which is, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And that's me. Thanks.